The first time my in-laws called me Jordans, I thought it was cute. I thought it was their way of welcoming me into the family, a nickname to show I belonged. But what I didn't know was that Jordans wasn't a compliment. It was a joke, a cruel label they gave me. The poor girl who married into their elite little world. And when I found out what it really meant, I made sure they'd never forget it. This isn't just a revenge story. This is about class, cruelty, and the bottle of very expensive tequila. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or made to feel like you didn't belong, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because this story, it's about what happens when the poor girl plays by the elite's rules and wins. I never thought I'd marry into money. Growing up, we counted every dollar, stretched leftovers, and reused wrapping paper at Christmas. My parents worked hard, not for luxury, but for survival. And I learned early, you earn your worth through your effort, not your last name. Then I met him. He walked into the restaurant one night, tailored suit, expensive watch, perfect hair. The kind of man who orders a $45 steak without even looking at the price. I was his server. He smiled at me like I was something new, something amusing. He flirted, asked about my life, and when he left his number on the receipt, scribbled beneath a tip that was half my hourly wage. I texted him that night, and from there, it felt like a fairy tale, the kind where the poor girl finally gets her happy ending. Little did I know, it was the kind of fairy tale that ends with poison in the apple. When we got married in 2018, everything looked perfect on the outside. He had the smile, the charm, the career, and I had the heart. But behind closed doors, his tone changed. He corrected how I spoke, how I dressed, how I held a wine glass. He'd laugh when I mispronounced something French and say things like, "Don't worry, babe, you'll get the hang of it. It's cute when you try." It was like he wanted me to fit his world, not be myself in it. And then came the moment I met them, his sister's boyfriend, the golden children of the family. We picked them up from the airport. I was nervous, my first time meeting the family he'd always bragged about. As soon as she saw me, his sister squealed, "Oh my God, she's totally Jordan's." Her boyfriend laughed, my husband smirks. I smiled politely, but inside I was confused. "Jordan's?" I asked. "What's that mean?" My husband put an arm around me and said, "It means you've got great style, babe." I laughed. "Oh, well, thank you." And for the rest of the week, that's what they called me. "Jordan's, can you pass the salt?" "Jordan's, this wine's more your style." "Jordan's, you're adorable." I thought it was their way of including me. It wasn't. On their last night, we decided to stay in. We opened bottles of wine, told stories, laughed a little too loud. The conversation turned sharp when my sister-in-law picked up my bottle of wine, a $12 blend I'd picked myself. She sniffed it, smirked, and said, "Oh, this is so cute." Her boyfriend chimed in, "It's definitely not something we'd drink, but it's got personality." I laughed awkwardly. I was used to teasing, but the air started to shift, that subtle cruelty that hides behind smiles. They suggested a drinking game, truth or dare, and that's when it happened. My sister-in-law dared my husband to tell Jordan's what it really means. He looked at her, then at me, and laughed. I remember the sound, high, nervous, fake. He said, "Jordan's is what we call homeless people who have swag." The laughter that followed still echoes in my head. They thought it was hilarious. Me, I sat frozen. My stomach dropped. My face burned. I tried to smile, but my hands were shaking. In that moment, I realized I wasn't part of the family. I was the joke. I barely slept that night. When I woke up, I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to make sense of it. The woman staring back at me wasn't Jordan's. She was the same woman who had worked double shifts, put herself through school, and paid her bills on time. And I thought, they mock me for growing up poor, but I built my own life. They were handed theirs. When I confronted my husband later, he acted like it was nothing. He rubbed his temples and said, "Babe, you're overreacting. It was just a joke. They didn't mean it." I pushed. He finally said, "I just told them about your background, so they'd be prepared." Prepared? For me? Like I was some animal they needed to brace themselves for? I went silent. I stopped arguing. But inside, something clicked. They wanted to see me as a joke, fine, but they'd choke on their laughter before this week was over. The next day, they went hiking. I stayed home. They didn't even invite me, said I probably wasn't into nature. Perfect. That gave me all the time I needed. My husband bought a $200 bottle of AIDS tequila, the kind his family bragged about. We were supposed to drink it that night. But instead, I grabbed my phone, hit record, and said quietly to the camera, "They think I'm beneath them. They think I don't know class. But tonight, they're getting a real taste of what class actually looks like." I poured the expensive tequila into my glass, one slow shot after another. Then I took out a cheap bottle of Sauza Gold and poured it into the now empty $200 bottle, swirled it gently, wiped it clean. Perfect. Then I sat back and spoke into the camera again. I grew up poor, but I grew up loved. I grew up humble, and I'd rather be that forever than turn into people who think money makes them better. By the time they returned from their hike, I was asleep, drunk, not from guilt, but from victory. The next night, the tequila came out. They poured their glasses carefully, admiring the color and the aroma. His sister swirled it, took a sip, and sighed, "Oh, you can taste the quality." His boyfriend nodded, "This is smooth. You can tell it's the real stuff." My husband bragged, "Yeah, this is one of my favorites, only the best." I smiled. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from pure, delicious satisfaction. After a few minutes, I stood up and said, "Before you go, I made a little something for you guys, just a thank you for visiting." I connected my phone to the TV, hit play. There I was, on the screen, pouring the tequila, talking to the camera, laughing. Their faces fell. My husband's turned white. His sister's mouth dropped open. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. I gathered the shot glasses from the table and said calmly, "Funny thing about taste, sometimes you can't tell the difference between class and cheapness." Then I walked to my room and shut the door. He woke me up an hour later, furious. He shouted, "My sister's crying. You humiliated us." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, sucks, doesn't it?" He didn't reply. The next morning, they left without saying a word. They didn't even look at me. And from that day on, they never spoke to me again. When we visited Europe months later, his sister refused to see us. And honestly, that was the sweetest piece I'd ever tasted. Years later, I left him. He was never going to change. Men like that don't. Now I'm free, happily divorced. And every time I sip cheap wine from a dollar store glass, I smile. Because it turns out being Jordan's isn't an insult. It's a title I earned. And it means I survived people like them with my dignity intact. At the end of the day, money can buy luxury, but it can't buy class. And sometimes, karma comes in the shape of a $200 bottle filled with $10 tequila. If that revenge hit just right, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Because remember, you can't buy grace, you can't fake empathy, and you definitely can't sip your way out of karma.